Yeah. 2 months ago, Titus Bartolotta called me up and he said, I got an idea for an event that I want to do, and it's not a leadership summit. I want to do something different. He said, and to steal a line from Tanya, it was, I want to light a fire, I want to reboot. Because after a year of this COVID thing, I want people to get back up and energized. And, you know, he's exactly right. What a crazy year it's been. But I told him, I said, look, when this thing started, I was ready to reboot then, you know. It was supposed to be 14 days to flatten the curve, wasn't that right? 14 days? But it's been a wacky, crazy year. And Chris and I were just talking. Some businesses had their best year ever. A lot of businesses didn't. But it was strange, you know, where church stopped. Business kind of stopped. And even though we're not quite victory over COVID yet, we're getting there, it is definitely victory over mediocrity, because we're done with that. But it's still a little bit wacky. We still got a little bit of COVID hangover out there. A little while ago, Bob Gores and I were talking. He said, you're not going to eat? Okay, Bob, I got a confession to make. I did this morning, kind of a ritual sometimes on Friday mornings. I stopped by Mickey D's on the way in, got my Egg McMuffin and my coffee. I've sometimes quit wearing a watch because I got a cell phone, but I didn't have my cell phone with me, and I'm standing in line at McDonald's, and one thing you don't want to do is be late for Titus's event. And when he says be here at 8:30, I was late to the leadership conference, and he reminded me of that. So I'm standing in line at Mickey D's, and I didn't have my cell phone. This guy in front of me, he's got his watch. And I said, excuse me, sir, can you tell me the time? He said, right now? No, 20 minutes from now, email it to me. You know, kind of weird. My mother, when COVID was just getting started, was in an independent living facility, and we didn't really feel good about that, so we brought my mother to stay at my farm in Rock Hill. I have a house in Huntersville, but I also have a farm in Rock Hill. And my mother was out there, and Mom can't quite hear as well as she used to. I can't quite hear as well as I used to. But if you come out, you could walk into the kitchen and say, hey, Mom, Mom, and you touch her on the shoulder and she jumps. And she says, oh my gosh, you scared me half to death. And I started thinking, oh, well, I better not do that again. I mean, what happens if you scare somebody half to death twice, you know? Think about that. But COVID gave us a time to reflect on things, and maybe too much time to reflect on things. Growing up, I was really into James Bond and Get Smart and Secret Agents. How many of you as kids had like secret agent kits? Yeah, I did. I had this machine gun that you took the stock off and it became the walkie-talkie. Had a little compartment for the invisible ink. How do you know when you're out of invisible ink? I didn't know that. And so speaking of restaurants, last week Susan and I went down to this new restaurant in Charlotte. It's called Deja Vu. Waitress came out and said, have I seen you here before? Kind of weird stuff. But my mother, a lot of people say, well, how did you get into doing what you do at the chamber? And why did you start doing that? Well, it became from my mother and my father. They were really big into community service. You see, my mom, she was a Jaycees. He talked about Jaycees. She was a Jaycees when there were two organizations. She was a Jaycees of the year for everything that she did. She worked projects for the March of Dimes, very big in the PTA. My father was in about every civic club you could be in. He was president of the Jaycees, president of United Way, president of Red Cross. He was president of the Junior Chamber of Commerce and Kiwanis, and he was the coach of Little League Baseball. He coached the women's softball team at the church. He was clerk of session of the church. One time I asked my dad, I said, why do you do all of these things that you do? And he said, there's a verse in Matthew's, let your light so shine to show your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. And I understood. You see, we all have a responsibility to leave our community and our world a little bit better. You know, Titus talked about I was president of the United States Junior Chamber of Commerce, but it's Jaycees, they call it Jaycees. And I got a chance to travel around to 47 states and 9 countries. I had lunch with President Reagan, which was a really highlight of my life to that point. I had beers with Charlie Daniels, and for our Southern board, that was pretty cool. I introduced the Beach Boys, which was another thing. They asked me, they said, lead us off with a song. I said, I can't sing. And they said, well, you know a song, don't you? I said, well, Bob, Bob, Bob. And they took off from there. That was kind of cool. I traveled up. I'd go up to Minnesota, Ohio, and Wisconsin, and I would tell these jokes, and they would just laugh. I'd come home to North Carolina, South Carolina, and they'd go and look at me. It dawned on me they weren't laughing at what I was saying up there. They were laughing at how I said it, right? The guys from Minnesota said, Bill, come over here. Tell them, you're about to go do something. I said, yeah. No, say it. I'm about to go. No, the way you say it. I'm fixing to go do something. You said it. You're fixing to go do something. But they would make fun of the way I talked. Well, in front of the Minnesota Jaycees, there was like 500 of them in the crowd, and I said, well, I think some of you are going to be surprised when you get to heaven. God says, y'all come on in. Because I'm convinced he or she has a Southern accent. But one of the things that I got to do was meet a young lady at the time. This was like 1991 or 92. And her name was Mary Lou Retton. And she spoke to our Jaycees. She's from West by God, Virginia. And she stood at a podium much like this. And if you've ever seen Mary Lou really, she's about this tall, very small. We actually had to get a box for her to stand in behind the podium so she could see over. But what an inspiring message. How many of you, though, remember Mary Lou Retton in the 1984 Olympics? Prior to that point, no American had ever won, male or female, the all-around gold. Prior to that point, no female gymnast outside of Eastern Europe have ever won the gold. But I'm going to tell you the backstory that you may not know. And that is, just about a year before she was to compete in the Olympics, something that she had trained all her life to do, she injured her knee. She's a gymnast, and the knee is critical. And the physicians and the trainers, they came to her and they said, you're not going to make this Olympics. You just can't do it. And as we just discussed earlier, she would not give in. She would not give up. And she continued to rehab and train and work until that moment. And I want to show that to you.
There's 2 volts, remember? Oh boy.
Yes! She has done the best vault of her life. Don't worry about it. Got it. Oh, we got you.
Taylor Caroni, hear him?
And the crowd is on their feet. What a moment for American gymnastics.
That's a 10. That's a 10. Dato danno sulla egalitate.
I think if they don't give her a 10 here, the judges may fear for their life.
That's right. They will tear the roof apart.
Boy, she landed. There it is.
She did it.
10, the gold medal. The gold medal goes to Mary Lou Retton. Oh, what a party they'll have in Fairmont, West
What a
Virginia
night.
tonight.
Good God. Fantastic. Fantastic.
She has another ball, and she's going to take it, huh?
Well, if she does the same thing, she does,
It was no accident, folks, huh?
just to prove it.
Oh, look at this. She's not tired now.
No.
Oh, what a tightly wrapped package of explosives.
Going into the last two events, she was facing a girl named Ectorana Zabo, a Romanian. And they said that even if she was able to compete, she wouldn't beat Ectorina. And going into those last two events, she had to score a perfect 10 on both the floor exercise and the vault. She was behind by 15 hundredths of a point. But in gymnastics, that's a mile. And she scored the perfect 10 on her gymnastics floor event. And then she did this. And she hit a 10. And if you know anything about it at all with the vault, you get two chances. It's not the average of those two. You get two shots. She nailed the 10 the first time. And then she went out there and did it again to prove it was no mistake. I watched an interviewer a couple of years later, I think it was on Wild World of Sports, and he said, Mary Lou, we watched you when you did that and you were focused, looking down the runway. What were you thinking? And she got ready to speak. He said, were you thinking of the millions of Americans whose hopes for a first-time gold was pinned on you? And she said, no. He said, were you thinking of all the years of sacrifices your parents made to actually take you to Texas to train under Bella, who trained Nadia Comaneci? And she said, no. He said, were you thinking of the injury and the year rehabilitating from that and all the years of the practices and all you went through? She said, no. He said, what were you thinking? And Mary Lou said, I knew I had to be my absolute best. And boom, she went and did it. And then she came back and she did it again. How many of us go into our days thinking, today I'm going to be my absolute best? You know, I'll share something with you about me. I'm a competitor. I hate losing. I hate losing. I'll say this with the pastor in the back. I think second place sucks, okay? I don't like that. And I don't like today that we're giving kids these trophies just for participating.
What?
Let me ask you a question. Do they give you guys a trophy for participating in business? No. Doug, do you have to be smarter and better than your competition to sell vacuums? Yes, we need to teach kids it's okay to fail, but you need to compete, and you need to win, and you need to understand what it's about to win. You know, a little while ago, we talked about integrity. And a couple of weeks ago, we recognized some of the outstanding businesses, the best of small business. Doug was one of those winners just a couple of years ago at A1 Vacuum Cleaner, the best of business. A couple of weeks ago, we recognized, I just talked to Jessica about the hospitality industry, an industry she was a part of, that probably no industry was pummeled as badly in COVID as hospitality, hotels, beds and breakfast. We just awarded the best of business in Davidson to a bed and breakfast. Because Mariano Doble, you know, the Davidson Village Inn has always been successful because the parents would come in and they would stay at the hotel to go over to see the kids at the school. They had a tremendous business for Ingersoll Rand. But at COVID, there was no classes at Davidson. There was no traveling from Ingersoll Rand. There was no overnight stays at the Davidson Village Inn. So Mariano and his wife Caroline, who enjoyed a glass of wine, said, let's do wine tastings. So they switched gears and started doing wine tastings at the Davidson Village Inn. They said, hey, we can make a package deal too. You can stay overnight at the Davidson Village Inn, particularly if you've really experienced some wine tastings and really got into it. And it was very successful. He created the Wine Society. And they're bringing in these wines to say, here's some you've never probably experienced. And now people are traveling again. Room night stays are going back up. Revenues are going back up. And not only is the Davidson Village Inn successful again, he's got a side business that is doing really, really well. The best of business and making the best of that bad situation. We also had a two-night event. Some motivational speakers came in, and it was a fantastic 2 nights. If you haven't seen it, you go to our Facebook page or YouTube videos. We had several great speakers, but one of them was Dr. Rebecca Heiss. And she had written a book on instinct. And she talked about our fears. And one of our fears from a primitive time is spiders and snakes. I hate spiders and snakes. I really do. But she talked about the fears that we have. One of them shared earlier, sometimes just getting up here and speaking in public. That night I went out with local BizNow Joe Vagnone. He hosts that show once a week. And I asked Joe, what do you fear? And Joe said, I fear failure. And I asked him if I could share this, and he said, no, I don't have a problem at all. And I said, Joe, I don't fear failure because everyone fails. That's really when we learn. It's okay to fail as long as you learn from it and don't repeat the failure and move on. But I think one of the things that people really fear is not being liked. And sometimes we make decisions that are popular. We sometimes choose the easier wrong than the difficult right because it's popular or people may continue to like us. A little while ago, Laura talked about Andy Roddick. I remember that. I like tennis. My best friend and I, we were watching that match. I remember that match from way back in, I think, the 90s. He was playing in a Spaniard, Verdasco. Laura already set it up that it was match point. When Verdasco served and hit it long, and Roddick looked at that clay court, he saw that spot, and he said, that ball was in. And so they said, okay, point Verdasco. Verdasco later came back, won that game, won the next set, won the next one 6-4. He lost that match. He lost probably thousands of dollars, but he kept his integrity. I wasn't a huge fan of Roddick. I really was an Andrew Agassi, Steffi Graf person. But to be real honest, I'll show you my age, I loved Connors. I loved Connors and McEnroe, you know? McEnroe. You can't be serious. I love McEnroe. They turned the tennis world upside down because, you know, in basketball, and Mick's going to go next year, he's going to be one of those dookies behind the goal and to get ready to do the free throw, and they're sitting back there and they're shouting, they're waving, they're holding the signs to break the concentration. The Panthers, you know, we're playing somebody and whoever the opposing team is gets ready to kick the field goal and we're out there just at the top of our, just raising Cain. Arkansas is playing South Carolina and you can bet I'm behind there going like, batter, 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 batter. But you go down to Wells Fargo and they get ready to putt, it's same thing with the tennis serve, right? Well, not McEnroe and Connors. They were something. You know, integrity is doing the right thing when nobody sees you do it. And that's what Roddick did that day. Teddy Roosevelt, we know Roosevelt from being the Rough Riders and being our president, being on Mount Rushmore. He's also a cowboy. Anybody know that? He was a cowboy. When I grow up, I'm going to be a cowboy too. I've always thought that. He's out there one day on his range, and they're rounding up some of the steers and calves, and they come up on this baby calf that hadn't been branded, and the ranch hand, he's fired up the branding iron, and Roosevelt looks over, and he said, "That's not ours." He said, "This is from the steer from the rancher next door." Probably out of Roosevelt's bull, but not his calf. And the ranch hand said, "Who's going to know?" And he got the branding iron, was just fixing to apply it when he grabbed it and said, "I'll know. I want you to go back to the ranch, pack up your things, and be gone by the time I get back. Because you see, someone who would steal for me would steal from me." Integrity. How many CEOs, how many sports celebrities, how many politicians, even pastors, lose their way, lose their integrity, and fall from grace? We read about it every day. I want to leave you with one more thing. I am so fortunate to be able to come in and be the president of the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce, where I can promote Lake Norman, because it's a great place to live and to work and to visit. But as we just talked about a little while ago, it can be a little bit better. Whether you're sitting here, right now, or you're back in your office on the computer, or you're watching this later on, I want you to think about something. Tonight, 5 minutes from where you're sitting right now, there'll be a little boy or a little girl who will lay their heads on the pillow tonight and go to bed hungry because there's not enough food on the table. Somewhere in the community you live, a teenager will smoke their first marijuana cigarette, do their first line of coke, maybe take their first pill. It could be they're looking for an answer, good time. It could be a suggestion from a friend. And you could say, Bill, smoking a joint is legal in some places. Today, they're lacing that with fentanyl. Fentanyl. So that the dealer says, my stuff is a little bit better. It's got a bump. Yeah, it's got a bump. And if your body is not ready for that fentanyl, you can go into cardiac arrest. Last month, I spoke to a Lake Norman mother whose son was just graduated from college, athletic, outgoing. His roommate and best friend gave him some coke to try. He had one line. It was his first and his last. His heart went into cardiac arrest because it had fentanyl. The roommate didn't know CPR. The medics arrived. They saved his life, but he was brain dead. It destroyed the parents. It destroyed the roommate, who had no idea what he was doing and the impact it would have. As Debbie talked a little while ago, somewhere this evening, in a community near you or maybe your own community, a woman will sleep in her car, just like she said. Maybe her kids with her. She'll go to the Gold's Gym or the YMCA tomorrow and take a shower and change because it's cheaper to do that than to get her own apartment. And it could be the school teacher. It could be someone who works in the attorney's office. It could be the dental hygienist. You don't know. Today, we did something about that here. Most of you in this room are involved in the community. You're involved in a civic club. You're involved in your church. If you're not, please seek out an organization, whether it's Jaycees or Kiwanis or Rotary, whether it's through your church, whatever it is. Get involved. Make your community a better place. Bobby Kennedy said, some people see things as they are and say, why? I see dreams that never were and say, why not? And as long as we have volunteers, as long as we have people like you, we will continue to see our communities as they can be. Thank you very much, and God bless.